Nature magazine retracted Ignacio Chapella's paper after publishing his peer-reviewed work. Biotech enthusiasts challenged the interpretation of his findings.
Biology was a very diverse field of inquiry, but because of the advent of this technology, we are seeing a narrowing down and a trimming off of all those branches of biology just to the benefit of this one side. And I very much want to fight against that. Just as we are losing genetic diversity, we are losing intellectual diversity that we are going to find very, very needed in the future.
The conventional wisdom in the U.S. today is that ag biotechnology is progress. There's not a lot of encouragement for young scientists to carry out research that might raise questions about that basic judgment.
The corporate control of genetic research is not limited to the field of agriculture.
They allowed the patenting of one of the genes responsible for breast cancer. And many researchers who'd been working on a cure for breast cancer were no longer allowed to use that gene in their research because another company had patented it and charged them very, very high fees. Some of the major pharmaceutical companies have gone into university laboratories and sued those laboratories and sued researchers who are using the genes that they own. This is probably the largest private takings of what should be the commons that we all own in common that you could possibly imagine. And I think one of the most disturbing economic trends of our times.
While biotech companies take over on an intellectual level, and genetic engineering takes over on a cellular level, multinational corporations are taking over worldwide by consolidating our food supply.
The combination of Kraft and Nabisco creates a real global leader in the food industry. Scale is a real advantage in this industry. As Kraft has proven, it increases both efficiency and effectiveness.
The average citizen doesn't really understand both the momentum and the extent to which consolidation is taking place in our whole food and agriculture system. Just to give you a couple of examples, 80% of our beef products now are being processed by just 4 companies. In seed companies, the vast majority of the seed that farmers plant now comes from just 4 clusters of companies. And what's even more worrisome now is in the last decade, that same kind of concentration has been taking place in the retail sector. And Heffernan now projects that in the next 10 years, all of the food in the retail level in the world will be controlled by 6 retail firms, only one of which will be American, and that's Walmart. Now that means that increasingly we're not going to have any choice about what's on the shelves in our supermarkets. What's going to be there is what some broker in a consolidated firm decides is going to return the largest profit.
One of the problems that the biotechnology industry has is that it's done nothing for the American consumer. There's nothing there. There's no genetically engineered food that does anything, no more nutrition, nothing for us. So how are they going to sell this technology to the American people? Well, they've come up with this idea that maybe biotechnology should be sold as the way to feed a starving world.
With world population expected to increase by 2 billion people in the next 30 years, biotechnology could provide an important way to produce enough food.
One major problem with that, the reason why about 800 million people starve every day, and that is a tragic fact, has nothing to do with the amount of food available. Most of these people around the world who are starving used to be farmers, but because of the World Bank and the National Monetary Fund giving huge loans to these countries could no longer allow for subsistence farming. They had to grow expensive export crops back to the first world to pay back those loans. So they kicked all these hundreds of millions of farmers off their farms. They end up in the Bhopals and the Mexico Cities and the Brasilias of the world without money. They no longer are growing their own food, and they're competing for the scarce jobs available in the new industrialization of these countries. They are no longer food independent. They're food dependent.
Amartya Sen, a Pulitzer Prize-winning economist, after a decade of work, pointed out again and again that the problem of hunger is not a production problem, it's an access problem. It's getting entitlement to food, not producing food, that's the problem. We're in fact overproducing the major commodities to the extent where farmers can't recover their production costs. And so we have huge subsidies. We have 800 million people on this planet right now who are malnourished in an era of overproduction where farmers can't recover their production costs.
When wealthy countries subsidize their crops, they undercut the markets of developing countries.
In 1994, on Christmas Eve, by the way, for the first time we said, you know what, we're going to try and have international rules on patenting. This was driven, of course, by the United States. And here's what's behind it. If you have gone into a third world country and you've patented a plant or a tree, the United States wants to be able to go back to that country and say, no one in this country, even though this plant originated here, can use it without paying us the patent fee. To do that, they've got to harmonize patent laws around the world. That's really the big prize for the corporations. It's one thing to make sure we're controlling the U.S. market, but if we can take these plants that we've gotten from the third world and make sure that no one in the third world can use them without paying the companies that patent fee, that's the big bonanza for the corporations.
The generalized perception in Latin America, I also think in Mexico, and many other parts of the world also, the new unipolar system has benefited the United States more than it has benefited the minorities of impoverished countries of the world. This is an issue of big concern because there are not so many political alternatives around. We may eventually go back to despotic types of rule that I don't think will help in any way to make countries like Latin America or Africa or Asia progress. We really need compassion for the people in the world that have less.
The resistance to globalization is that it stems from the insights of some people that, the corporations, they want to be able to go in and make the money, but they don't want responsibility when things don't work out.
One of the most ironic parts of the fact that the biotechnology industry is saying that it's going to feed the world is that it has created a new technology called Terminator technology. And this technology is basically a suicide gene that's put into crops, so after one planting, they commit suicide. You cannot save the seed because the seed then is sterile. It will lead to no crops in the next season. There's 15 patents by first world companies on this suicide technology. Can you imagine what is going to happen if that suicide gene pollutes crops around the world?
A few years earlier, a lot of people were saying, well, won't these technologies outcross into wild species? And the promoters said, no, there will be no outcrossing. And then just in a few short years, they were back saying, well, okay, there is outcrossing, but now we have a new technology that'll help deal with that. And this, of course, raises the question, well, what about outcrossing of the Terminator gene?
They are also developing trader technology so that a farmer has to spray his field with a proprietary chemical in order for seeds to germinate and grow.
We have the potential of ending up with green deserts where you don't see the difference. The environment will continue to be green, but it is being transformed from inside. And when that cracks, when that monoculture breaks down, it's going to be very massive.
As we move into the future, what could we find on our supermarket shelves? there are thousands of test sites for new GMOs in the United States. In 2002, the USDA condemned 50 million pounds of soybeans contaminated with GMO corn engineered to manufacture a pig vaccine.
My biggest concern is we're merely going to go into the future believing that, somehow the technologists are going to solve the food problem, then we're all going to be okay. And, we're going to have a very, very rude shock.
The biotechnology industry, of course, is not simply interested in genetically engineered crops. We are seeing them trying to extend their reach throughout the rest of the living community. Right now, our government is looking at approving genetically